You've tuned into Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet. Dark winter has begun. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be getting into the big news, but obviously the descent into dark winter has begun. Now, we've been talking about the fact that this is more like airborne mad cow disease than anything else. And we talk to people about it, and we see that, some of you don't get it. And I know why you don't get it. As an undergraduate, the people around me were history majors, secondary education, sociology, psychology, etc. The arts. Gotta love the art majors. And I myself was a science major, biology, the study of life. Worked in the lab, cultured microorganisms, understand the science really well. And I think that's the difference here. Most people don't understand the science. And most people never even made it into college, I'll be honest with you. Like and share, get this information out there. I see a lot of people running around with all sorts of ideas, and I understand why they think the way they think. Trust me, I do. That's why I'm here. Set the record straight. And there's a reason why we've been talking about this disease as airborne mad cow disease, because that's exactly what it is. Coronavirus, historically, is basically like one of two types of viruses. It's like, the body, or it's like neurotropic. This one happens to be neurotropic. So it's definitely neurotropic, as well as Ebola for the rest of the body. I mean, it's like the super deluxe coronavirus that nobody's ever seen before. This thing, it's like nothing anybody has ever seen before in terms of coronaviruses. And we're going to be getting into how we know that. Big shout out to everybody in the audience. I see Nick Smith out there. Good morning. Death of the New World Order. Breaking Bad. Indeed. Hammond, how you doing? High school dropout. No virus for you, Hammond. Huh, buddy? All right. Just kidding, bro. Yeah. Don't ask me why we do what we do, but we do it. Getting back to the biology of this virus, here's a very important document that we're going to be covering extensively so that you know what you should know. But essentially here what we see is different virus strains. So, okay, here, let me highlight it for you. Virus strain, host range of coronaviruses. We'll show you where we get this. Okay, but this science is pretty old. And when you look at the effect on the host, on the victim, and they list the symptoms, let's go through them with you. Encephalitis. Okay. Intestinal infection. Okay. Encephalitis. Okay. Diarrhea. Encephalitis. So these are different, viruses on different organisms. Encephalitis again. Intestinal infection. Inapparent stealthy CNS infection. Central nervous system infection. Encephalitis. Encephalomyelitis, which is even worse. Encephalomyelitis. Encephalomyelitis. In fact, when you look at the pathology of this type of virus, it essentially almost always goes to the brain. This is a brain wasting disease that everyone's been infected with. That's what people need to understand. Now, again, I understand as well that people don't get the science. There's a lot of people that don't get the science. And, as an undergraduate, I met all sorts of people, as you can imagine. And, they wanted to be teachers, they wanted to be philosophy, sociology, psychology, computer programming, criminal justice, arts, you name it. All right. But I mean, for the most part, those people have no clue when it comes to biology. I mean, they think of a cell like, a circle and then another circle, and then you draw some dots and you got some ribosomes. They just don't understand. They don't understand. And people need to understand that this is what's going on. Now, we're going to get into a text called The Biology and Pathogenesis of Coronaviruses. This is a fairly old text, but it's really interesting because it tells you all sorts of things you never knew before. And we're going to be getting into, some of that as well. See if this will load properly. But, okay, we're going to get into this one a little bit later. How's everybody doing out there? What do you guys think of the big news? I mean, it's rather symbolic to see the President of the United States infected with the coronavirus. It tells us that it's reached another stage. The Senate, the House, the White House, all contaminated. The highest echelons of U.S. government contaminated. Schools contaminated. Lockdowns coming back. This virus hasn't gone away. What is it? This is not the flu. Severe COVID associated with elevated antibodies, exactly the kind of antibodies you'll get with a vaccine. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And a lot of people just don't understand coronaviruses. Look at this article. We'll try and get into it. Spike glycoprotein of murine coronavirus mediates receptor-independent infection and spread in the central nervous systems. So essentially, once it gets in the body, it doesn't need ACE2 anymore. ACE2 is nice, but this thing is a receptor-independent infection that can jump from host to host and infects the brain. And you have to wonder why this hasn't happened before, because, this thing had to be basically engineered to infect humans. Otherwise, this wasn't adapted for humans. But the nature of the virus is to spread in the central nervous system, independent of ACE2 receptors. And we've been talking about that as well. They suspect that it's the acetylcholine nicotinic receptor, which is what nicotine binds to, and it's why they think people that smoke have a less incidence rate of this virus. Now, I know what you're thinking. Many of you are probably thinking, well, I still haven't seen this disease. It's begun. Mad cow disease takes 5 years before people go from normal to they can't breathe, literally. It hits you like a nerve agent. But it takes about 5 years. Maybe it's less with this thing. The more infectious the virus, the faster the disease onset tends to be. So we could be looking at something that wipes out humanity in 2 years and not 5. The murine coronavirus hepatitis virus strain A59 from persistently infected cells exhibits an extended host range. All of a sudden, once an infection starts brewing, it's able to infect other species that aren't even, in its list of species. Viruses tend to be species specific, but this virus loves to jump around. It just didn't have the key for humans yet. They gave it the key to humans, and now we need to understand what this virus is. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about the uptake of vaccines against coronavirus too, but here in the New England Journal of Medicine, they say essentially we'll have to begin by making it voluntary, but then it'll have to be mandatory. When a mandate might become appropriate. It'll become appropriate rather quickly. And it'll probably make the situation worse and spiral the entire world into, twice the black hole it was previously in. And it may take months before people realize just what this does, because essentially what we find is that in nature things either enhance or deactivate viruses. And this may include pH, it may include oxygen content, it may include all sorts of factors. The thing that we really want to get into is a review of herbal therapy and multiple sclerosis. Because there's herbs that have been recognized to help in, nerve wasting diseases. So we'll be getting into that. But you can check all this stuff out. It's on PubMed. We're just, aggregating it together and going through it, under the theme that this is airborne mad cow disease. This is an airborne brain wasting disease. And the damage does not stop at pneumonia. It doesn't stop at flu-like symptoms. That's just the beginning. That's your body telling you that the virus has arrived. Obviously, the Matrix does not want us to talk about anything right now. COVID-19 attacks the beta chain of hemoglobin and captures the porphyrin to inhibit heme metabolism. Basically messes with the ability of your blood cells to carry oxygen. That's why people feel short of breath rather quickly, more quickly than before. And so it tries to choke you out. Not only by filling up the lungs with debris, but also by, messing with the ability of the red blood cells to carry oxygen. Scientists warn of potential brain damage linked to COVID. This has been in the news, but people ignore it. They don't understand what it means. And a lot of people are out there right now thinking that there is no virus. The science tells us that there indeed is a virus. Now, there's a lot of things that may come up in terms of why this, why that. But for the most part, it looks like something new is killing people. And science has identified it as this virus. There isn't another lab that has identified something else for the most part. Although there was a redacted paper talking about 5G inducing coronavirus. We feel that 5G activates coronavirus. We'll be getting into that. And the subsequent flare-ups then become detectable with tests. But at this stage, we feel that there is a virus. It is a coronavirus. And that certain factors like EMF enhance the virus. What do you guys think about that? Not too many people want to hear it. Most of you won't understand, and that's okay. That's okay. But we'll syndicate this information anyways in case it does register with some people out there. But, as far as who are you going to listen to, the person that really never took a biology class or had any interest in it, or the people that have. And, look, the world is the way it is today because of the scientific method. It works. It works. It's observation. It's testing. It's, hypotheses and the like. And that's become illegal these days. Every hypothesis is now a conspiracy theory. You're no longer allowed to ask questions, challenge ideas, and the like. We're going to probably skip the antigenic relationships, but distinctly, coronaviruses are in different types of groups, you could say. And certainly, the neurotropic coronavirus is probably the worst of the bunch. We're just going to start reading this for fun here. Most coronaviruses cause clinical diseases only in the species from which they were isolated and replicate predominantly in cell lines derived from that host. Now, there's specific reasons why this happens, but coronaviruses tend to be host-specific until they started engineering viruses that weren't. However, transmission to other species can be achieved either experimentally or, for some virus strains, by a natural route of infection. The natural infection of dogs by the porcine strain transmissible gastroenteritis virus and a single case of diarrhea, etc. That doesn't sound too nice. The experimental intracerebral inoculation of several coronaviruses into mice, rats, or hamsters often induces an infection. The brain of suckling mice is highly susceptible for viruses of avian, human, and mammalian origin. However, infection under these experimental conditions is not representative for the clinical disease in the natural host. A survey of the organs involved in coronavirus infections is summarized in Table 4. Some coronaviruses reveal relatively restricted organ tropism, leading to disease of the respiratory system, GI tract, the liver, the brain. In other coronavirus infections, for example, with feline and murine coronaviruses, several organs are involved. The murine coronaviruses, mouse coronaviruses, represent a group containing many strains with different organ tropism. In addition, feline, murine, and avian coronavirus strains have a strong tendency to establish persistent and chronic diseases. That's why it's still here. That's why they're still talking about it. It's why people have been feeling symptoms since they were infected. A persistent and chronic disease that attacks the brain. Do you understand? Should we draw you a picture? I feel like drawing, all sorts of things right now. The first murine coronavirus described was MHV, a real nasty one, which was isolated from a spontaneously paralyzed mouse. They're like, what the fuck happened here? Let's isolate the virus. Subsequently, other strains were isolated from different disease conditions and different organs of mice. Murine coronavirus infections are often subclinical or inapparent, but clinical disease can be activated. It can be activated by co-infection or other means. And this is where the death towers really come in, because the death towers let them steer the outbreaks. It doesn't have to be 5G, as far as we can tell. And in fact, it might not even be telecommunications equipment for the most part that's activating the coronavirus. It could be something ultra low frequency, and nobody would know. In fact, if you know anything about the electromagnetic spectrum, is that there's all sorts of noise out there as we speak. We just discovered something about the 612 kilohertz, which is like 612 on your AM dial, that will blow your mind. It can take out the internet. 612 kilohertz, they use that as kind of like troubleshooting if broadband goes down. I tried driving around with 612 kilohertz. You can tell you're getting zapped by shit that you didn't even know was there. We invite everybody to drive around at 612 kilohertz and see what's going on in your town and some of the lower AM frequencies. Because all of a sudden, all of these sounds that are coming in, that's like rogue energy from somewhere. It could be HARP, it could be, these ELF towers and the like. It could be anything. And of course, they add the 60 gigahertz just to suffocate you a little more. Here, have a mask. Enjoy yourselves. You know what I mean? No sunshine for you. I mean, they want to make vitamin D basically illegal in the UK. They're not going to use it as a regimen or as part of their treatment for COVID. All they want to give people with COVID is like Tylenol. They want to give people Tylenol, go home. That's it. No hydroxychloroquine, no remdesivir, no Regeneron. None of that shit for you. You get the fucking Tylenol. No oxygen for you, no nothing. Stay at home. And everybody's like, I ain't going to the hospital. So they stay at home and they fucking die. And it could be from a whole lot of things. But there's a reason why you're not seeing it. Is because people are just staying at home to die. And that's why they want to lock you down during the peak periods, because they don't want people seeing people dropping dead at the fucking shopping mall. Gyrating like this. Cytokine storms. There's a reason why this happens. This virus has a payload. It has a package. It's like a cruise missile. It does all sorts of things once it enters the body. But it goes for the brain. And it does everything it can to kill a person. It really does. That's why we've been talking about all of these natural herbs and spices. And at the very minimum, people should have whiskey, baking soda, turmeric, and probably some H2O2, hydrogen peroxide. That's a must. And a multivitamin, your magnesium and your B12 especially. Get an immune system booster like spirulina or selenium, zinc, Give yourself every advantage here. Because this is a persistent infection, a chronic disease like HIV. No vaccine is going to save you. Period. Forget vaccine. But this is a chronic infection like HIV where people can get reinfected and the dose makes the difference. The dose makes the difference. In the literature, you always see lethal dose. At this dose, this happened. At this dose, this happened. The more you're exposed, the worse your disease. So if you're out there in the country, in a small town, right, and you're avoiding people like the plague, good on you. But don't go out there and tell people that there is no disease. What do you know, really? What do any of us know? None of us have a lab, but all the people that do have a lab are saying the same thing. There is a disease, it's, there's different variants, but it's also like alcohol consumption. Some people get drunk with one beer, some people it takes, a case of beers for different reasons. It's not always about tolerance, can be about other things. And there's a wide spectrum of, basically, people out there with different conditions, and it's just going to affect people differently. Everybody's got a different threshold. That's really the thing. But eventually people will get to that threshold. And I have no doubt that many of you have felt something weird this year. But unfortunately, this virus is stigmatized like herpes, and nobody wants, to be positive. Nobody wants to be quarantined. Nobody wants to admit that they have coronavirus, and so everybody says they don't have coronavirus. I've seen, the worst of the worst offenders attempt to lie and live in denial. And you can't help but to burst their bubble from time to time. These viruses can be transmitted by feces or urine. They can be transmitted by air. Obviously, the prevalent diseases resulting from MHV infections are hepatitis, encephalomyelitis. You can look what that is. You can look up what that is. But encephalo means brain. And myelinitis is an infection of the myelin sheath that basically insulates the nerve and allows it to conduct its impulse from, the core to the little, synapses. But it's like the insulation on wiring, essentially. And this virus attacks that insulation around the wiring. And it's like this with pretty much every neurodegenerative disease. And then we also have the enteritis, which is the infection of the bowel system, the bowels. A strict classification of MHV into hepatropic, neurotropic, and enterotropic strains is not possible at that time. However, since under certain conditions several organs are affected and the type of diseases varies to a great extent with the age and genetic background of the host, the role of murine coronaviruses as pathogens of the respiratory tract must also be taken into consideration. Obviously, variants which differ in organ tropism are easily selected in tissue culture or by animal passages. What does that mean in virology? Anybody know? Anybody out there? Let me check. Are we still live? There's a few of you out there. You guys getting this? You mean this didn't come from a bat, says Mongol Rex, Secret Siren, how you doing? Many others. MS Mellowcat, AXA, Sherry, how you doing, Steve? Many more. Look, we can talk about, all of the real peculiars as far as, why this virus seems to evade surveillance. But that's the nature of a bioweapon. This is a bioweapon from a lab meant to kill people. And essentially, it is now biowarfare everywhere. And you have to wonder if, they didn't import, a highly, let's just say, condensed form of this virus and release it into the White House. How would people know? How would you know if they weren't weaponizing the test results, telling everybody in the White House that they were negative until they all got extremely sick? That's exactly what you would expect these people to do. Who are these people that are doing it? We've been talking about that in other broadcasts, but we're not going to necessarily get into that right now. But I have no doubt that they're weaponizing test results. And, the pure fact is that everybody was infected in January, February, and March. And now they're telling the people that they want to tell that, whatever results that they want. We like these people, they're negative. We don't like these people, they're positive. And maybe they'll tell people that they're negative when they're really positive just so that they'll get more sick because, disease is dependent on virus load. If people think they're negative and they're just, acting, normal, the virus load in the rooms that they're in the houses that they're in the offices that are in, they're going to skyrocket like secondhand smoke. That's essentially what, virus shedding is like. It's like secondhand smoke. And if you've got 10 smokers in the same room or 5 smokers in the same house, all smoking inside, you can imagine what the air quality is going to be like. That's essentially what we're talking about here with virus load, and that is directly dependent or directly proportional to disease, outcome. And if people think they're negative, then they're not going to air out, they're not going to take any precautions, they're not going to do anything, and so their world becomes more toxic. So at this stage, the only way to really, navigate through the world is to assume that everyone is contaminated, that everything is contaminated, and that it's basically biowarfare everywhere. That is the only way, that is the only safe way to proceed at this stage, given what we've seen. And that is our firm recommendation. And all the other people that don't have an education that want to argue about it, they can do that someplace else. You know what I mean? So we're here reporting the news because that's the right thing to do. All of these people, that are saying no virus, are telling people to run out there and be normal and expose themselves to higher than average virus loads, which will have a negative outcome, in the long term. And so, look, it's okay to do that in San Francisco, but in communities like ours, I think it's better to be honest with one another and say, look, this is what it looks like right now. It looks like quicksand. And the more they try to maneuver out of it, the worse it's going to get, essentially. So lockdowns aren't going to work, the masks aren't going to work, the vaccines aren't going to work, the testing isn't going to work. What is going to work? It's essentially reducing virus load within individuals and within the environment. That's all that can be done. They have to scrub the air, they have to air out, they have to ventilate, and it looks like that any type of injury may exacerbate this infection, as well as any other type of co-infection, including the flu, including vaccines. This may enhance what this virus does. And things in nature will either enhance or deactivate this virus. That's why we recommend baking soda. It seems that by making sure that your pH is neutral or slightly basic, can have a severe impact, a huge impact on how this virus basically propagates, as well as the damage that it does, because it's causing collateral damage. It burrows into the body, into certain cells like HIV, and it produces viral proteins that essentially cause inflammation, suppress the immune system, and allow it to replicate. This is a virus, and it's meant to basically destroy the core of your consciousness, like the movie Hackers, when they're hacking the computer, the central core. That's what this virus is trying to do. And most of the sheeple out there will never get it. And so every day that goes by, they're becoming a little more loopy, a little more forgetful, a little more aggravated, with a distorted sense of reality. They're going crazy, and they don't even know it. And all you can do at this stage is, try to save yourselves, save those that you love that will listen to you. And most won't listen to you. There is no virus. There's nothing to worry about. See, there's nobody dead around you. You have to think about this in terms of strategy as a bioweapon. What kind of bioweapon would you want out there? Something like Ebola or something a little more stealthy? The problem with Ebola is that, it terrifies people. And so, essentially, and it kills people so quickly that it can only go so far before people really start to lock it down. And even, with the, lab strain in Western Africa that we saw back in, what was it, 2014 or whatever, even that thing eventually burned out. It didn't get really worldwide because it kills so fast. That's the problem. And a couple lockdowns and this thing is burnt out. You need something slow. And the slower the better. That way, no lockdown will stop it. That's the problem, is that no lockdown will stop this virus, and chances are lockdowns will make it worse, because everybody in the household is just going to be breathing in that, virus-laden air, and they're going to drive up super infections in their homes. I mean, we've seen this virus just wipe out entire homes, and the reason is because of virus load. That's what people don't understand. Virus load drives this disease, among other things. Let us continue. Shall we continue? How's everybody doing out there? Clones, yes, the clones. That's another thing. We've got this, super virus, and then we've got clones everywhere. Death towers everywhere. What do you think's going on? But the more you know about this virus, the more seriously you take it. Now, that doesn't mean that you should hide in the fucking basement and never go outside, never get any sunshine or fresh air. That's not what we're saying. We're saying don't expose yourselves in public places. It's not worth it right now. You want to be cool. You want to be on Instagram. You want to go viral. Oh, you're going to go viral. Yeah. Still breathing for now. Thankfully we are. But there's some people that aren't. And we talked about a 19-year-old athletic college student just the other day, and a lot of other, bizarre cases. The numbers are so low, right now, that most people don't know a COVID victim. But soon you will know a COVID victim. And most of you should be, to the stage right now where you know that, you felt something last winter, and you're going to feel it again this winter. Several murine coronavirus strains replicate predominantly in liver tissue and induce an acute fatal hepatitis by destruction of various cells. The highly virulent strains of MHV cause... Hold on a second. The highly virulent MHV strains cause hepatitis in adult mice. That's an infection of the liver. Less virulent but strains will lead eventually to a similar disease. Enteropathogenic MHV in young mice, etc., causes hepatitis only in newborn mice, etc., etc. Chronic hepatitis, etc., etc., etc. But just because you haven't died from pneumonia doesn't mean that you're in the clear. That's the thing. This thing will continue to attack the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the brain. That's the thing. And even in cases that were mild in terms of the primary infection, the initial flu, though some of those cases were already showing signs of brain damage and the like. So it is not something to laugh at. It is not something to go, to ignore at this stage. But I think people need to recognize that right now everybody's got mad cow disease mixed in with HIV. The clock is ticking, and we need some enhanced interrogation when it comes to these people that have released this virus, because they may be the only ones with the cure. So all of these people on TV, basically have to have to be arrested, put on trial, Nuremberg style, until they cough up the antidote. Anyways, getting back to the biology and pathogenesis of coronaviruses, you can check this document out for yourself. It's highly captivating, especially if you have a science background. Murine coronaviruses can cause encephalitis in suckling in adult mice. The strain MHV is especially neurotropic, ladies and gentlemen. So why have we been talking about that? Why are we talking about that? Because people are ignoring the obvious science. Coronavirus will spark brain damage epidemic as even mild cases cause inflammation. Can you read that? I know you don't want to take it seriously, but imagine this is what we're dealing with. All the science tells us this is what we're dealing with. Even this document, which is essentially, a 1980s biology textbook on pathogenesis of coronaviruses. This is pre-SARS. This is like, it's like a geology textbook telling you what these rocks are. That's what this is. So, and we're seeing a lot more cases now of like this brain damage associated with this virus. You may not want to take it seriously, but maybe you should take it seriously. By the natural intranasal route of infection, the virus invades the central nervous system via the olfactory nerve. Now look, you've heard this in the news today. You've heard this in the news recently. People lose their sense of smell and then it goes up to the brain. You heard that, right? They were documenting this. I'm not sure what year this was written, actually. But it looks fairly old. I mean, we're seeing references in the 1970s, 1980s. Okay, looks like we're just going to have to find our way back to where we were. But Look, they were describing the exact same thing 30 years ago as we're seeing today. Neurotropism, it goes through the nose, up the olfactory nerve, straight into the brain. The video guy's fired. Just letting you know. Must be on this other page here. No? So, encephalomyelitis. Again, if you like science, we've been reading, nothing but white papers on this virus and similar viruses. This thing is going to decimate civilization that you don't even understand. That's why we're sounding the alarms. Now, people really need to get, with the program, the vaccines aren't going to help. We need something today. And if it's hydroxychloroquine, that's okay for now. But everybody should be on some kind of prophylactic, dampening the infection, globally. Bringing down virus load in every community in every town. Otherwise, people aren't going to make it. And look, it's probably going to take a while for the libtards to understand, but as far as intelligent people out there, they should get the ball rolling on, on prophylactics. And at this stage, given that you're probably not going to get the hydroxychloroquine, we just, tell people, get your baking soda, get your turmeric, get your vitamins, magnesium, vitamin B12, and all of the other herbs. We're going to get into what herbs can protect you. I think that's probably really important. You want to jump to that right now? I think we should. Have you seen enough of this, of how this is going to fuck you up in the whole world? Everybody in a matter of years. Look, you've probably already seen people, get more abusive at home this year like no other year. It's related to this virus. It's not just the stress of the lockdown and all of that. It's the beginning of this disease. As well as people stammering and just kind of becoming a little dyslexic. That's just the beginning of the disease. Multiple sclerosis is a complex autoimmune disorder, right? Kind of like lupus, kind of like COVID. That's why the hydroxychloroquine works. Multiple sclerosis is a complex autoimmune disorder which is characterized by the demyelination of axons in the central nervous system. Maybe all of that rings a bell. Several evidences indicate that some new drugs, etc. But we're going to get into what herbs they thought were beneficial. So ginkgo biloba was studied and tried, and numerous studies, it looks like, and improvement was, for the most part, recorded. What else we got? So we got multiple sclerosis. We got the ginkgo biloba. Okay, so I thought there was another listing of this. I'm not sure if this is the right listing on this article, but we'll just go through it systematically, whatever. Zingiber, I'm not sure what that is. Curcuma. You'll probably want to, write all this stuff down. Check out this article. I don't even know what that is. But there's quite a few things. I think there's another listing of this in this article, so that's why I'm not spending a whole lot of time with all of this right now. But it includes cannabis sativa. Turns out that cigarettes and cannabis might be secret weapons against this, against the neurotropism of this virus. So if you're a weed smoker out there and you're scratching your chin, you're like, I feel okay. Well, this might be one. But nobody else is going to be okay. So the weed smokers are going to inherit the world, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think about that? Use of herbal medicines in multiple sclerosis according to symptomatic problems. Let's see. Let me just kind of go through. Okay, I think we've got, this is the listing I was looking for. So we got ginkgo biloba. We got the zingiber, or ginger. That's what it is. So ginger. Yeah, get the ginger out. Ginger root, all that. Curcuma. Get that. St. John's wort. Get that. Let's see. Valeriana. Valerian. Haha. Valerian. So get that as a tea, perhaps. And you might not want to do all of these at the same time, because it'll have like an ultra, effect. But, one day here's like cranberries, right? So one day you want some cranberry juice. Every day you should probably be taking turmeric or curcuma. But every once in a while you can have some valerian tea. You can have some like eucalyptus, right? Let's see. So cranberry is really good. What else? Black seed, nigella sativa, really. Piper, kava. Anybody ever try that? These are just some. I mean, there's a lot others. But I mean, if you start looking at herbs and remedies for MS, that will give you the best chance, I think, at this stage, because they're very similar in types of diseases. And if it works for MS, chances are it'll work as a prophylaxis for COVID-19. That's the idea. And I think that's probably going to give people the best chances of survival, really. Saffron, Crocus sativus. It's funny how all the good stuff is like a sativa. Huh? Get the saffron out there. Ginseng. So that seems to be something as well. I'm not sure what that is. Boswellian paper-free or whatever. Grapevine. Seems like grapes are pretty good, but you got to watch out for the pesticides. You want to get some of that fruit soap if you can. And there's some other ones. Tianma. I'm not sure what this is. It's like teas, green teas, exotic herbs, anything that might be antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, detox. And you can find this at your GMC store, maybe not GMC, but some kind of nutrition store, organic nutrition store. Look at the detox, look at the herbal cough syrups, look at the things like that. But take a while. And I don't think any of these are going to be a magic bullet, but together they may offer you like a much better chance than other people. And it's becoming a fight of survival of the fittest. And look, as far as doses, which regiment, I think everybody's really got to kind of do their own research. But don't think that just because you smoke weed that everything's going to be okay, or that just because you smoke cigarettes everything's going to be okay. It may lower or slow down the disease, but it's not a silver bullet. And I think everything you can do to lower your virus load, lower inflammation, and improve your immune system is going to be the winning combination until we can actually get a real antidote. Cannabis sativa, a flowering plant in the genus Cannabis from whatever, et cetera. Cannabis sativa is the most important and most common plant which is being used for the treatment of multiple sclerosis. According to this document, there are numerous studies that indicate cannabinoids consumption reduced muscle stiffness, bladder disturbance, spasms, neuropathic pain, sleep disorders. So, let's see. The cannabinoids act as a partial antagonist as well as anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective properties. So I'm not sure. That's from a study talking about cannabinoid modulation of neuroinflammatory diseases. So, chances are it's going to help, but it might not be a magic bullet. You know what I What else we got? Not sure if we're gonna sit here all day talking about this, but the spike glycoprotein of coronavirus mediates receptor-independent infection. It seems like the spike glycoprotein, especially, on this coronavirus, is like a Swiss Army knife that opens up and does all sorts of things. It's booby-trapped. From what we can tell looking at it, it's got rabies toxin on it. It's got all sorts of other things. And it's like a standalone weapon all by itself. And, if their bright idea is to inject people with, spike protein, and if the spike protein is booby-trapped, then undoubtedly, the vaccine is going to do as much damage, if not more, than the virus long term. We'll have to see. That's the theory at this stage. So, and I think that they're going to have all sorts of problems with these vaccines that they're really not going to tell people. They're probably going to look at it as like, well, it's only 1 in 1,000. Overall, if we only lose 0.1%, most of the people out there will be okay with that. And so initially it might only look like, 0.1%, and then all of a sudden they realize, well, that long term, this actually causes something completely different, especially with like these self-replicating mRNA vaccines that they're trying to put out there. If this thing is self-replicating, and we don't know how long it self-replicates for, could be months, could be years, while this thing is self-replicating and generating new spike proteins, it could be sending like that all by itself could be sending like, all sorts of missiles into the nervous system, causing autoimmune disease. And so that's why I'm not really hot for this vaccine. In any case, it's too late for a vaccine. Everybody's got this virus. So they keep talking about a vaccine. Everybody's putting all of their eggs in one basket with a vaccine. And I'm not sure people really understand what they're talking about. Because it's too late for a vaccine. And even if they have a vaccine, it didn't cure the flu. There is no vaccine for HIV, and so I think people really need to come to grips with the fact that there probably will never be a vaccine for this virus. They can keep telling people that there's a vaccine coming, and if the elite gets sick, then they'll get the remdesivir while you get the fucking Tylenol. And as you can see, that's going to be problematic. So, look, all sorts of things are coming, but we definitely need all of the, people out there on the right side of the fence to survive this best they can, and knowing is half the battle. So, again, for the people that, never made it to college or ended up being like, some kind of art major or computer science major or something like that, you have to admit that biology just isn't your thing. You don't understand it. And it'd be like, it'd be like computer programming, and all of a sudden you think that you can write this huge, program with no programming experience, and this is not the way the world works. In any case, let's read a little bit more of this if we can. The outcome of experimental intracerebral infection is similar to necrotic lesions that are localized in the hippocampus, olfactory lobes, and other tissues. Now, it seems like every time this virus cycles through the person, because you can get reinfected, and every time it does, spark a wave of infections that reaches the brain, it's going to leave lesions. And, people only use, like, they say, not even 10% of the brain. Obviously, most of the people out there don't even use 2% of their brain. So they got a lot of gray matter, a lot of empty space that doesn't do anything really for them. So they can get cycled, by this virus, 1,000 times perhaps before it's actually going to, hit them in a way where it, it disables them permanently. And perhaps it's a little random, where these lesions show up. Sometimes it'll be in a place that doesn't really matter. But sometimes it'll be a place that's, that's involved with people breathing or their heartbeat or something else. And so there isn't like, a distinct pattern as far as where these lesions just show up. It's just, kind of random. It's like random damage. And it's just by chance that, it hits something, more or less important. Demyelination is prevalently confined to the brainstem and spinal cord, but, we're seeing brain tissues as well. In mice which do not develop an acute disease involving the gray matter, et cetera, and viral antigen. Hold on a second. In mice which do not develop an acute disease involvement of gray matter is minimal. In mice which do not develop an acute disease involvement of gray matter is minimal, and viral antigen is detectable in white matter up to 28 days post-infection. So what this tells us is that, during a cycle, it's in your lungs in your nose for about 7 or 14 days, but it's in your brain for, a month. And there's going to be a peak, and then there's going to be a trough. But let's see, electron microscope studies demonstrated that the oligodendrocytes are the main target for the virus, but especially in young mice, the virus can be detected in neurons and various other brain cells. So all of these children right now that are going to school, big fucking brain damage, big time. They're already kind of retarded with the phones and everything, but now they're going to be, twice the retards. They're all going autistic. So keep sending your kids to school. Let them breathe it in. You're so confident that there is no virus. Send your kid to school, and watch them turn into a fucking retard. Especially in young mice, viruses can also be detected in neurons, especially in the young, et cetera, et cetera. And this may be the tailspin of the disease that really freaks everybody out. All of a sudden, in like 5 or 8 months, we start seeing a bunch of college kids and high school kids dropping dead because they've been forced to sit in the classrooms all year. Huh? Infectious virus can be isolated from animals with acute encephalomyelitis at any time during the disease process. Infectious virus can be isolated from animals with acute encephalomyelitis at any time. Now, we've seen some variation in terms of where and when they're finding it. Sometimes it's, the viral proteins that are causing the damage as part of the autoimmune response. Sometimes it's active replication of the virus. And it's not just like, virus shedding, budding. This thing grows tentacles. It invades the neighboring, cells. And then it starts forming things like, multinucleated, basically chimeric, half-breeds in your body. Mice do not show clinical signs within the first weeks post-infection, PI, or which recover from disease, can develop a chronic infection of the central nervous system. And, if this thing is releasing prions like Madcow disease, it doesn't even have to be a virus, an active virus that's acting like a wrecking ball in people's brains. It can just be rogue proteins that are just basically turning other proteins into retards, literally. And so, breathe it in. Studies on remyelination in these mice indicated that some of the cells active in remyelination might be newly generated cells. No information is available. So maybe, you can partially reverse the disease, but continual exposure to reinfection will definitely turn into like something like Madcow. So that's the warning here. Let's see. In recent experiments, Stolman and Weiner induced a chronic infection by intracerebral inoculation of JHM virus into a 3-month-old mice. No clinical diseases were observed, but during the first 12 days post-infection, virus was recoverable from the liver, the brain, and the spinal cord. 3 months Post-infection, small foci of viral antigen were detectable in 70% of these animals, and by electron microscopy, demyelinated lesions were found. At this point, immunosuppression did not lead to clinical disease, and no infectious virus could be activated or isolated. But again, these are studies from like 30, 40 years ago. What have they done with gain of function? They've made sure that these new ones, act like a full-blown wrecking ball, and that's the end of it. That's why they're, chosen for further study. Let's see, experiments using cloned JHM viruses. I mean, they were cloning viruses 40 or 50 years ago. You don't think they're cloning people now? Let's see, temperature-sensitive mutants. And look, we could talk about temperature, variants, pH variants, but, we say get a little baking soda in you, half a teaspoon, 3-5 times a week, maybe more. I mean, it really depends on the person, their diet, but seems like this really kicks off and gets off on what's referred to as acidosis. And that's something that you can look up, acidosis. But there's a lot of acidosis with this virus and with the severe cases of this disease. And so we feel that low pH is probably enhances this virus, and a higher pH slows it down or blocks it. I mean, that's what hydroxychloroquine does. It raises the pH in the cells and just outside of the cells, and stops this thing from activating. Once it invades, then it goes into the acid hotspot of the cell and explodes basically into all sorts of products. Let's see, fatal diseases were caused only after inoculation, etc., etc. Further studies revealed wild-type viruses replicated in both nerve cells, oligodendrocytes, whereas a TS mutant replicates, etc., etc. So, this thing was picked to infect, invade everything. It's airborne. It's like HIV. It's like Madcow. Don't play with it. And if you don't have an IQ that's at least, equivalent to a rat, then you need to shut the fuck up out there. Or at least go back to NBC. I don't want to see you. We'll leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Till the next time, ladies and gentlemen.